cross of the family, which also holds a place of honor in the shrine. Teach the mother to hang on the cross as often and as many times as there are members in the family. The words of our Lord he said about himself and his own cross, about his crucifixion, should also apply to the mother of the family. When I am lifted up on the cross, I will draw all things to myself. The mother of the family has to prepare herself that the children will grow up. She has to expect that the children, like so many young people their age, will sooner or later cut the apron strings and go their own way. Then she should and may repeat again and again, when I hang on the cross, I take care of my children. What I can no longer accomplish through my words, I may do, similar to our Lord by his crucifixion, by my own cross and suffering. Unquote. The spiritual world became more and more an everyday reality. We have seen and lived this reality. Through all the challenges of life, and there have been and are many, the living shrine with the life of the symbols gave a foundation, an anchor. As I mentioned with my father and mother, Father prayed a special prayer for each of us and our symbols. My mother felt how important these words of Father were, and she typed them on a special card for each of us, words for us to live by. My older sister chose to be the bell in the shrine, the bell in the bell tower. Several years after she was married, she moved to Alaska, far away from all her family here and all that she was familiar with. This was very difficult for her, and she felt the natural loneliness of being far away. She meditated on how she was the only member of our family who chose a symbol from outside the shrine. But now, whenever we hear a bell ring, we think of our sister. And when we would take my parents to the shrine, even in their last years, when they would go with their walker and their wheelchair, they would always have to ring the bell for their daughter and say a prayer for her. I still do this now, and I tell her that I ring the bell and pray for her in the shrine. And this brings her near and gives us both great joy and comfort, knowing we are united spiritually in the shrine. When Father was here in Milwaukee, the home shrine became a reality in stages. It began with the living shrine stream, and then came the dedication of the home shrine, and then later the naming of the home shrine. This photo was taken when Father came for the naming of our home shrine. The name my parents chose for our home shrine is Confidencia Heroica, heroic confidence. Later, after Father left Milwaukee, they added in the spirit of the Magnificat. And this is the shrine you see here. We, the children, saw our parents live out of this ideal. We saw this being deeply lived in our parents' souls. These ideals became part of the very air we breathe, the great atmosphere we lived in, and still have a huge influence on our lives. One of my younger sisters has had many difficulties throughout her life, and for most of her life she did not really feel at home in the world of Schoenstatt. She had difficulty with many things having to do with Schoenstatt, but the one connection that she always held on to was her symbol, the candle. This was her one contact, her one attachment to our Schoenstatt world. She would always remember that she was the candle and that she needed to bring light to the world around her, and she would try to do this. Sometimes we cannot see the graces working in our lives until many years later. 4 years ago, now in her 50s, she finally felt drawn to dedicate her home shrine. She felt the need of our mother's presence in her home, in her life. This actually took place the year that my parents both died. She chose the name, the ideal her home shrine, One Heart. She feels the powerful graces that help to root her in her faith and keep her strong through all the many difficulties that life continues to hold for her. She tells me often how often she runs to our mother in her shrine and finds peace there, united in one heart. We watched our parents growing more deeply in their symbols. Mom and Dad, and one of my brothers in particular, felt very strongly about the importance of the living shrine, and they talked often about it, feeling the need to share it. I would like to share one example of the importance of the living shrine in our family. It's a story of one of my brothers who had a serious nervous breakdown in his late 20s. It's a story that he feels compelled to share, and I will read it in his own words. Quote, "In my own experience, the living shrine is invaluable. It has given me a point of contact with the supernatural world and has deepened my love for all that is sacred within the church, within the depths of our Catholic faith. The idea that each person chose a symbol came very naturally to our family. It wasn't something that was only for the children, but for the parents as well. And as Father prayed a simple prayer for each person and their symbol, he spent more time on Dad and Mom than he did on each of the children. This to me shows the importance of childlikeness before the Father. Simple, humble childlikeness, especially on the part of the mother and the father. If I were to tell you how my life progressed from the time of this living shrine dedication until this day, there would be many blank spaces. The road I traveled was that of many young people growing up in these difficult times. My life and soul hovered many times at the edge of the abyss. What saved me? The living shrine. The further I would go from the realization of my ideal and my symbol, the more my parents would grow closer to their own symbol and their ideal. My brothers and sisters, too, were united in a very special way, and we knew one another as brothers and sisters normally do, but also through our symbols. There is a spiritual sense of togetherness that crosses many miles, boundaries, and differences. Our citizenship should always be in heaven, St. Paul says. We need in our time something to draw us there. The home shrine in its living dimension can be that icon that draws us upward, heavenward, always higher, until we reach the goal of our journey." End quote. If you remember Father's words about my parents' symbols, my father being St. Peter, the key, opening the gates of heaven for the children by living in heaven with all his heart and soul, and my mother, the cross, hanging on the cross and suffering for each child in need. They truly took their symbols to heart. And as you can see, and probably all know, just having a home shrine does not mean that we always live in the clouds, that it will be like heaven on earth. Even when you have a home shrine that was blessed by Father himself, there are very real crosses and sufferings. They are part of the world we live in. But we know that we are never alone. Our Mother is there with her graces to lift us up and help us through all of our difficulties.
Through the grace of the home shrine, Father gave our families new life. My father had a special relationship with Father Kentenick. It was that of a son to a father. My father had a difficult relationship with his own father. His father had several nervous breakdowns, and the family life was difficult. My father left home as soon as he could. With Father Kentenick, he felt he had found a real father. How it was to be truly loved by a father. How it was to be a true son. and how to be a true father for his own children. Every morning before work, my father would go to Father Kentenich's Mass at 10 minutes to 6 in the morning at the Exile Shrine. Since we didn't have a car, this meant he would get up at 4:30 in the morning in order to get to Mass. Daily Holy Mass had always been important to my father, but now he would not miss Father Kentenich's Mass in the shrine. On Saturdays, he would sometimes take us older children to Mass at the shrine. We would walk the 2 miles to the shrine. Along the way, I remember my father would sing the Magnificat in Latin, and we would play games to keep ourselves occupied and entertained. After Mass, we would go to Father's office. Father would invite us in, sit us children down in a little table in a hall, and then he would disappear into the kitchen. He would return with whatever he could find to give us children. A donut, a piece of fruit, a cookie, potato chips. Then he and my father would go into his office, and my father would go to confession and have spiritual direction. My father did this almost every Saturday for 3 years. You could say he was truly formed by Father Kentenich. This is the type of access we had to Father. Just knock on his door, and he would stop everything and make time for you. My father wasted no time. My mother said he was a changed man, a changed husband, and a changed father. Almost the very words of my father's living shrine prayer. He was a teacher, and he gave up his summer job and the extra income so that he could help my mother and be with us children. He did much of the cooking and clothes washing and food shopping. We had an old house, and he taught us how to work. But he also taught us how to have fun. We had no car, but we had 10 bicycles. He would take us on adventures around the city. We would go to the museum, the beach, the zoo, the swimming pools, lakes for fishing. Since there were so many of us, we had birthday party or 2 just about every month. And my father was always the wild leader of the festivities. It was a glorious time for us children. We could not have known, though, that only 11 years after Father Kentenich left Milwaukee, at the age of 48, my father would die of heart failure, leaving 11 children at home with my mother, the youngest child being only 6 years old. But in those years, he totally dedicated his life to the family, his wife, and to his Schoenstatt life, so that we had a firm foundation for the future. At my father's funeral, during the burial at the cemetery, someone overheard my 3 youngest brothers, who were 6, 7, and 9, discussing who their father was now talking to in heaven. One thought it was Gilbert Schimmel, who is one of the first Schoenstatt men in the U.S. and very close to Father. The second thought it was the Blessed Mother. And the third thought it was Father Kentenich. How could 3 small children take so naturally to heart a supernatural reality that most adults don't even acknowledge? It is explained by 2 stories. When my father was in the hospital after heart surgery and was hooked up to many monitors and tubes, one of the Schoenstatt fathers came to visit him. My father asked him, "Have you ever seen the heart of the Blessed Mother?" The Schoenstatt father looked at him a little quizzically, not quite comprehending what he was getting at. My father simply pointed to the heart monitors above his bed and the blue line tracing the heartbeat across the screen. He said, "There is the heart of the Blessed Mother." For him, the covenant of love, exchange of hearts, was so real as the bed he was lying on. This was the atmosphere my parents strove to create and surround us with in our home shrine. After numerous trials of growing up in our family, with many of the same struggles that happen in most families today, the loss of faith, divorce, education difficulties, after many years, all 12 children are now practicing Catholics, which is very unusual in our country. Through all of the years of raising the children on her own after my father's death, the life of my mother had created with my father and the home shrine were her anchors. Father guided our families in the life of lived faith and helped them to practice the liturgical traditions in the home, making faith a part of life. My father was very sensitive to Father Kentenic's education in how to make faith come alive in the family. A Lenten tradition my father started in our home was a crown of thorns, which he wove from a thorn bush. During the year, my father would give the Blessed Mother in the home shrine, and to my mother also, roses from his rose garden. When the roses died, he would save the petals and dry them. During Lent, for every offering we made in the home shrine, we could put a rose petal on a thorn, so that by Easter the crown would be blossoming and soft for our Lord. Even the smallest of the children